Dave, the advocate. Today, the pleasure of having a Bond as a guest of the CJ Cares podcast. How you doing today, Dr. Bond?
I'm doing great. How you doing this evening?
All right. All right. And as we get started, are you team Android or are you team?
I'm team Android. Never had an iPhone. I'm good with the Android.
All right. Okay. Okay. And do you follow sports?
Yes, I'm still a huge Giant fan. Love my Giants. We made the playoffs this year, so I was happy about that. And I also follow the Mets and Yankees too. You know, back in the day, my mom was a huge Met fan, so we actually used to take the train to Shea Stadium. So I still follow the Mets and the Yankees as well.
Okay. So I got a question for you. Do you believe the quarterback of the Giants is worth a $40 million contract?
Now I'm gonna say this, and I'm a Giant fan. He's had one great year, and they had a good coaching. I love Brian Dabble, but I do not think he's worth that. Now he better have a good year this year because I think he overachieved a little bit this year. But his offense didn't have great receivers; they had mediocre receivers. But if he's gonna get that $40 million or whatever he's asking for, he better show up and show out.
Definitely. And what was your favorite destination for travel?
Wow, some of my best place I love to travel. I love Florida. I lived in Orlando area for about 9 years, so I love going to Orlando, Kissimmee, and also Miami. Love to travel there whenever I get a chance to.
Okay. And where are you originally from?
Now, I was born in Queens, New York. I was actually born in Queensbridge Projects, and at the age of 9 was when we moved to Freeport. And my dad bought a house back in the day in Northeast Freeport, and he was an engineer at Con Edison, and so we were one of the few Black families in that area of Northeast Freeport back in 1984.
Okay. And you went through the Freeport School District as well?
Yes, from 4th grade on, because I went to Archer Street for 1 year, then I went to Atkinson for 2 years, 5th and 6th. Then I went to Dodd Middle School for 2 years, and then I went to Freeport High School for 4, and I graduated in 1992.
92. Okay, so you're 2 years before me. This is a Freeport friendly podcast.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yes, and you know how we are from Freeport. We like to show love. We are family oriented, and once we know someone is from Freeport, you automatically get love. So
Definitely.
Fort Knox all day.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Right. So I want to get into the book you wrote. You know, I think that one of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to highlight a lot of African American authors, people who have stories to tell. And I was trying to do it in Black History Month. I felt kind of bad that we kind of missed that opportunity, but my mom was like, "This is Black History every day, you know, so
Right.
we can still educate and highlight information that is worthy of being trumpeted, you know." So
I agree.
Give me some of your background in education. Where did you go to school?
Now, I did my undergrad was at Old Westbury. I actually graduated from Old Westbury back in 1999. And it's amazing. Old Westbury is an amazing school. May I rest in peace. Reverend Calvin Butts, who was the president my last year there, really turned that school around. And that's where I got my undergrad in history, and I majored in history, certified history, and basically I'm certified now to teach pretty much every social studies subject from about grades 4 to 12. I'm also AP certified, so I've taught AP government, AP history, politics, you name it, and war history, and that's a little bit of my background. And I've done administrative work before, been department chair for history department. Also, I taught in Florida. I actually was academy leader. I was over the whole middle school from 6th grade to 8th grade over all the administrative work, and so I have a certificate in administration as well for from grades 5 through 9.
what is the title of your book?
I'm sorry, I can hear you.
I said, what is the title of your book?
Oh, the title is Unsung But Forever Remembered: The Man Who Invented the Automobile Turn Signal, David George Bond. I want to make sure in the title that my grandfather's name was as the one who did invent the automobile turn signal, because I felt it was necessary. You know, we have been trying to research for years, so I want to make sure that his name was in the title, that he was an unsung person in history. But he's always remembered by the Bonds, whether the Bonds are in North Carolina, New York, wherever they are. He's always been remembered for his greatness, but also being an awesome grandfather in person.
That's excellent that you took on this task to remember your grandfather. It's a legacy. I'm sure your family is proud to have a part of your family, you know. Now, I know that in the book I read that early on you were sharing the stories about your grandfather and people didn't really believe you. And I believe it was like your third grade teacher, she kind of doubted you. And so how did that doubt from your third grade teacher fuel you to want to keep your grandfather's legacy alive?
Well, even from a young age in third grade when it happened, it bothered me because I didn't know all the details about it. Every now and then my family members would say, yeah, your grandfather was an inventor. But what he invented the turn signal. And I would say, well, what happened? Like, you know, how come we're not rich? I mean, we're not broke, but why we're not rich? And then they would just change the subject. And so there was kind of like a frustration. Also, it's kind of like, or like a family secrecy, but they didn't talk about it much. Every now and then they say, well, we should be rich. So my third grade teacher, when I was at PS 150 in Queens, New York, I said, my grandfather invented the turn signal. And she's like, you're lying. And I said to the teacher, I said, please be quiet. I'm not lying. And she thought I had an attitude with how I said it. And so she called my parents. My dad was an old school guy. He didn't play. He didn't take mess. So she told my dad what I said. I told her to be quiet. But she did, you know, after she told everything, my dad did say, my son may have been a little rude, but he was telling the truth. He was like, my father did invent the signal light for cars, because he said to the teacher, I teach my kids to tell the truth. So I like the fact that my dad did, you know, look out for me and check that teacher who assumed I was lying. So even from a young age, it was kind of like a mystery because we heard about he invented this, but never knew the whole story. You'd hear like, shh, yeah, don't talk about it. And every now and then someone would say, this Bond should have been rich, but we would not hear the details of the story. And so I think it motivated me even from a young age to find out. And I remember when I first started teaching, even back in 2000 to now, last 22 and a half years, I would let my students know what my grandfather did. But until about maybe 6-7 months ago, I didn't actually have the proof and have it published that he did. So it was always a motivating factor for me to just find out the truth and bring it and shed some light on it.
How did you find out the truth? What kind of research did you have to do to find out accurately what your grandfather had done?
Well, the first thing I did, I went to my ancestor. I'm still alive, my aunt, who was my grandfather's daughter. She's 85 years old. I went to her, interviewed her about some of the facts about what happened, how he did have the patent, how long he had the patent for several years, and how he was getting threats from the white supremacist groups in town. Even when he tried to vote, he was getting threats. And you know, she told me life of living on a sharecropping farm and how tough it was for them. But even with all the hard work, she was able to go to Shore University. The work of sharecropping, which she had 9 other brothers, my dad included, was the reason why she was able to go to college. And she always thanked my uncles, which were her brothers, for helping along the way. So that was one source where I got the information from. I also interviewed other family members. But the really most important thing was getting a copy of that patent, because you can say all you want, but if you don't have that U.S. patent with the U.S. patent number, the serial number, you know, when you look at an invention and it'll say like patent number 6,114,000 so and so. If you don't have the information, there's not much you can do. So about 8 months ago, I stumbled upon a copy of its original patent, and it had the patent number. It had his 2-page explanation for how the signal light worked. It had his drawings of a 1927 Ford Model T, because at the time, no car had signal lights. And so also his signature was on the patent, and also his lawyer's signature was on there, which was like a form of notarization as proof of it. And so when I found that, I was so excited, because now you couldn't deny it that he invented, because when you have the patent number and everything else, that's it. Now, what's interesting, a lot of people, historians, friends of mine, like, Steve, we can't find your dad's name at all, your grandfather's name. So what you really have to do, you have to do an extensive Google search, Google patent. You have to know his whole name, the year, patent number. If you don't have all the information, you won't be able to find it. So my goal is one day it's in the history books. That way you don't have to go do an extensive Google search and intensive research for the information like I did, and where I got the information 8 months ago.
Now, how old was your grandfather when he created this invention?
Here's the amazing part, Chuck. He was actually 16 years old when he started inventing it. In other words, he was at a boarding school in Palmley, North Carolina, which is Martin County, North Carolina. It was one of the few decent Black schools at the time, because remember, this is 1923, 24. Schools were still segregated due to Plessy versus Ferguson. So this is one of the few schools he go to. And so he said he was just looking outside the window one day, because it was a vocational boarding school. He looked out the window and saw a car in the dark and said, cars should have a signal light. He said, God showed him that signal light should be on cars in the front and in the back. That way, no one can hit you from behind, because they'll see you signaling from the back and from the front. And what he also, which was idea too, that when you step on the brake, there'll be a light which shows you're slowing down and stopping. So these were ideas he came up with at the age of 16. So about 3.5 years later, March 1st, 1927, was when he officially got his patent from the U.S. government. He filed for it January of 1926. And so a year and 2 months later, March 1st, 1927, was when he officially got the patent from the U.S. government. So at the age of 19, he had a patent, which is to show the genius of a man that he really was.
That is incredible. He was already inventing even before he was he was like in college school age, you know, like he could still have been in college,
Right.
but he was already taking up a trade basically, and he fixed an issue that was a part of, you know, the trajectory of cars, right? So the evolution of cars, they didn't have turning signals, and now he has this epiphany from God that shows him, like, you know, you need to add lights. And I'm sure people were blown away by what he was able to come up with, because they did exactly what they were designed to do. You
Right.
know? So I think that you know, if you know, as you drive and you look, you know, I just wanted to mention this too, because since I've been driving, you know, and I became aware of the story, I feel like I drive with a little bit more pride, you know, because I know that as an African American, we are geniuses. We can do it all. We've created everything that this world uses, you know. And I was just thinking, I was like, wow, there's something as the turning signals on a car. You know, it's like is a very integral, important part of the car now. Like you can't drive a car without it. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's very awesome.
Right. And what I think about sometimes is how many accidents were avoided because signaling to the left or to the right or the brake light. how many lives did it save? You know, you think of it that perspective. And even we look at golf carts, forklifts, pretty much any form of transportation that's on the road or something has a signal light. I remember working in Costco years ago, back when I was in college, and we drove forklifts. The forklift had a light to go left and one to go right. So it's something that pretty much every moving vehicle has. And he's definitely should be credited for being the innovator of it.
So do you think that he should still be given credit in a certain type of way now in 2023? You know, it reminds me of other stories, like, say, for example, Henrietta Lacks. I call her, I've dubbed her the mother of healthcare. She was someone that was taking her rights, her patient rights were trampled on. They exploited her body. They took DNA from her body after she passed away, and her DNA became what they use for studies for cancer cells and all types of different research. They all get it from Henrietta Lacks. So it triggered something in me where I wanted to ask you, I feel like after all these years, do you feel like African Americans who made inventions or are responsible for the culture, the way that things are done now, should be given a certain type of what maybe monetary or some kind of award, lifetime achievement? I don't know, but what are you feeling about your grandfather and other African Americans who were summarily just trampled on and taken advantage of, and their ideas stolen?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I personally feel it doesn't have to be monetary, but it should be put in all the history books. You know, few people have asked before, like, are you out for money? I was like, no, it's more for recognition. My grandfather, I said, if anyone would get money from it compensation wise, I would want it first be to my aunt, who is the oldest relative, who is his daughter. So if you do that, because the first report was, you know, he had pretty much $1 billion idea taken away, but he was not, you know, he lived a full life, has his own company where he sold soils and landscaping. And he when he passed in 1999, he still owned 2 homes and acres of land. So more than anything, I want the recognition to be in the books and stuff. And I'm glad you mentioned Henrietta Lacks, because about 5 years ago, I was asked by a reporter from the Wilson Times, what can be done to recognize Henrietta Lacks more? And I've known the story for years. And when I started 4 years ago, I started an essay contest for my history classes, where the students could do an essay about Henrietta Lacks' legacy. And what I would do, I got a grant where I was able to get a little money, so the winner would get like $30-40, second place $30, and the runner-up $20. And a couple of times that names were in the local newspaper. And so it's been something I've been proud of to do the last few years, and I'm gonna do it again this year. So it'll be the 5th year doing it, where it becomes an essay contest, and I take a picture of the 3 winners. And so it's become really part of my class, which students look forward to. And I usually always do it in March, hence it's Women's History Month. But I started in March because the idea was brought up to me about what should be done. And I was like, let's have an essay contest where students research her. And so March 5 years ago is when it started. And so just like with Henrietta Lacks, where I do feel her family owes something, she owes something, where her cells helped save thousands of lives, maybe hundreds of thousands, and got nothing for it. So if you want to compensate, great, but at least put it in the books to say, you know what, it was done wrong. She does deserve the credit and accolades that she deserved in passing. And that's really how I feel about my grandfather, because more than anything, he wanted to be a devout husband, father, leader, and provide for his children and grandchildren, which is what he did and then some. So long as it's documented, I think I'd be satisfied.
What is the period in American history known as the nadir of race relations? What does that phrase mean?
For me, that nadir means like that lowest point, that darkest point in American history. And depending on who you ask, probably end of the 19th century, 1890s, when Reconstruction pretty much ends, and in 1877, after the Rutherford B. Hayes into an election where the Northern federal troops, I'm in the South, lead, de facto segregation really takes flight of the whole South. And so really having that time between early 1880s, to the modern civil rights movement in the 1950s, you had thousands of lynchings, murders, disenfranchisement, economic opportunities taken away. Pretty much the manhood and womanhood of blacks were taken away. And it was done legally, unfortunately, and by law. And so we not only see the Klan in that time, not just the lynchings, but the sundown towns. You come down in North Carolina where they had the cities that was on the other side of the track. You're on the other side of the track past 8 o'clock. You probably not going to live to see the next day. It was during this time also, from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, where we saw the race riots, massacres in Tulsa, Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood, Florida, Atlanta, Mississippi, on and on and on. And this is really a dark and negative and turbulent, scary time for African Americans. You looked the wrong way, it meant your life. You didn't have to do anything. You could have been accused and you were killed. Emmett Till got killed. He was accused of something. And the two guys that killed him talked about it and bragged about it in a newspaper. Because of double jeopardy, they could not be charged again for that crime. So we also had in Florida, not just Rosewood, but you had in Lake County where the 4 boys were killed. So you had the Ocoee race riots in west of Orlando. So there were so many cases of murders, lynchings, threatenings, suppression of voting, suppression of rights, suppression of employment, suppression of economics in that span. And there's so many stories, just like my grandfather, that need to be told, need to be explained, and more importantly, need to be apologized for. Because those people like in Rosewood who lost their land, one thing they don't like to talk about. I know John Singleton made a movie about it, but when they talk about, because John Singleton didn't want to be too negative, there was no hero to save them. They had to go, some escaped to Gainesville, but the rest was slaughtered. Now, one thing we talk about much was that the Carrier family from Rosewood got, I believe, $2 million of compensation from the government for their home being burned. Black Wall Street, Tulsa, one thing I talk about, they rebuilt Tulsa after the massacre, but it was the building of the highways, the systemic things, the gentrification of the community, which really brought down Tulsa, Black Wall Street, just like the Durham, North Carolina Black Wall Street. They put the highways where those professional businesses and places could not survive because they put the highway there on purpose to suppress the Black businesses from being as affluent as they were.
Now, you mentioned in the book about the unwritten rules. What are they, and do you feel that they still exist today?
Some still do, but back then, a lot of the unwritten rules were, like I said, with economic suppression, you can go to a bank and apply for a loan, even if you had the credit and couldn't get it. My grandfather went to 3 banks and tried to get a loan to renew his patent. They all said no. Now, obviously, he knew he had the invention. Normal thinking would say, okay, this guy's got this big invention. Let's loan him the money because when he makes the money off of it, he's not going to forget me. Or, the TV show Shark Tank. Now they have a Shark Tank show where you got an invention, you can pitch it to those guys and they'll help you with it. Those things weren't there back then. So it was suppress. So suppression in economics, like with my grandfather, the sharecropping system, which made sure you stayed financially in a rut. That was also part of that whole thing. The unwritten rules, the sundown towns, the other side of the track. You try to vote and you get threats, like my grandfather, where he tried to threaten to kill him and his children. So these unwritten rules were there. So that's why people were scared to vote. They were scared to go to the other side of town or try to get a loan or to do different things which could have met their life, because those threats were there. Now, is it better now? It's way better. Is there still need for improvement? Of course there is. You look at the discrepancies, only 2% of educators are Black male. There's no reason why only 2% of all educators are Black males. Something's wrong with that picture. You can't tell me there's not enough Black males who are qualified to be in the classroom. Like I said before, it's systemic. And so we look at education, there's still discrepancies where like predominantly Black schools do not get the funding that they deserve. Or sometimes there are schools where they don't get the accommodations they need as students. The teachers that they have are not as experienced or certified or qualified. Therefore, the teachers are not showing the skills or the patience or the tools needed to help these kids out. That's why many times young Black males will get a rider or referral 3 times more than their counterparts. So there's still a lot of discrepancies in our system. And my hope and prayer is that it continues to get better. Yes, it's way better. But in my view, we still have a ways to go. I drive near Kinley, North Carolina, and a Black woman had won one of the managerial positions for the police department. And all the white police officers from Kinley, North Carolina, they all resigned. That shouldn't be. So we still see racism, prejudice rear ugly head enough, and not just in the South, but we see it creeping in other areas too. And there's to me, saying there's been a renewed boldness of racism. I think these last probably 4 or 5 years, we've seen racism come out in the forefront more, not just with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and, Freddie Gray and other people who have been killed. So we still have a ways to go.
Now, you did touch on the answer. Why do you think your grandfather, struggled to find buyers to help him for his new invention with basically getting funding for it? Don't you think that there was some that understood the financial gain of it all? And do you think that the hate was just so deep that they just didn't want to see a Black man be championed in that fashion and make money? Or do you think it was just, all other reasons that you already listed?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but I really feel like one of the other issues was that he had to be discreet with the invention. In other words, when he was at the Louisville Vocational Technical School in Palm Beach, North Carolina, a lot of Blacks at school knew he was working on it, because after his classes, he would work on it. But he was very quiet about it because he knew if too many white people knew, it would be a problem. So it was a little bit of both. It was that where he could not advertise as much but also he was getting letters from all over the country. There was a guy in Canada who was trying to meet up with him to say, listen, I'll help you pay for the patent. So there were some people that were trying to help him. But what you have to remember, he had to be very careful and discreet, because, one false move and it could mean your life. So I do feel there were some whites who did want to help him. And my aunt determined as a white guy who did say, well, I'll help fund your invention, just signed his paperwork. And then when he saw the paperwork, his 2 sisters, which were teachers, read the paperwork, and based the paper was saying that if he signed this, he's going to pretty much give all the legal rights to this guy, this white guy. So his sister told him, David George, don't sign that. You'll be signing away your life. So he had many opportunities as other people had. Yes, there were a few people black and white, they're trying to help him, but he had to be cautious. One, because of his life on the line, but also back then in the 1930s, who could you trust in rural North Carolina? So those were the major issues and concerns he did have at that time. He was trying to get people, sellers, because the big three were around. GM, Chrysler, and Lincoln. Those three companies were around, but for some reason, they weren't able to reach him.
Knowing what you know now about business development, do you think that your grandfather should have continued making new inventions?
That's a great question. Here's what actually happened. My grandfather was just a jack of all trades. Like, his thing was electronic, just like my dad was, because my dad actually was a supervisor engineer at Con Edison for about 31 years. He would make and create so many things, but he was so frustrated because of what happened. He never tried to get another patent. I remember even back in the day, 40-some years ago, he would have sensor lights in the house where light would go off at 8 p.m. in the living room. 9 p.m., lights go off in the bathroom. He was creating these things even back then. And the story was told that one day he did think about patenting something else, and a relative basically said to him, why don't you try to patent some again if they stole it the first time? And they said quietly he was frustrated and just let it go. But those who knew him, he had a part in his old house, and that house is still owned by the Bond family in the Indian Woods section of Windsor, North Carolina. And in that closet, he has so many gadgets, contraptions, light fixtures, so many things he had invented, but never bothered getting a patent for, I guess, in his sake, like, why should I? What's the purpose of it? So when I say this man was creative, he was way smarter. I know that was the type of man he was.
Now, do you think that African American inventors are showcased enough today, now that time has evolved and we've become more known about African Americans who contributed to the development of this country, United States, like Benjamin Banneker and others? Do you think that they are properly showcased today?
Honestly, not enough, not even close, because you mentioned one of the people I definitely admire, Benjamin Banneker. That man was a genius among geniuses, and to delegate just 1 month for African Americans' inventions, innovations is far from insufficient. Far, not even close. Give you another example, Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan invented the traffic light. He was able to receive $40,000 for the traffic light. $40,000 in reality does not even come close to what that traffic light is worth today. And even on another note, when you look at Garrett Morgan, someone last week in my class did a presentation on Garrett Morgan. He also invented the gas mask that were used in World War I. And that saved hundreds of thousands of lives because the Germans in World War I were using the poison mustard gas in the trenches. And then some people did not want to use it in case the black man invented it, but when they started using the poison gas, they used a mask. And so how many lives were saved in World War I in the trenches because of Garrett Morgan? So I feel it's not even close to being for African Americans getting the recognition they deserve for their inventions, discoveries, innovations. Yes, you may hear about it for 1 month out the year. And sometimes I'll be honest, it bothers me where February 28th passes and then you think to yourself, March 1st, we hear anything about a black inventor. We hear about Lewis Latimer. Will you hear about Benjamin Banneker? Will you hear about, Captain Johnson and Hidden Figures? Will you hear about these stories after February 28th? And the sad reality is Probably not. You probably wait again until next year, February 1st. And that bothers me. And that whole thing needs to change, in my honest opinion.
Why do you think there are forces going against great inventions such as the one your grandfather created, especially since there were great benefits for everyone who got behind the wheel?
Well, the Jim Crow South at the time was really a tough time, turbulent time in American history in the 1920s and 30s, because after doing some research, when I had the story done on WNCT in Greenville, North Carolina, their writers looked up the story and they searched to try to see who is giving credit for the automobile turn signal. And the guy who's giving credit for it, and they put the editing in the story, he got the patent by the US government in 1929. And my grandfather years before. So how is it that the guy who had the patent 2 years after my grandfather, when you Google search it, he's given credit for it? Why is that? And nothing against that family, but that should not be the case. Give credit where credit's due.
So how has the response been since you released your book? What has your experience been since you released it?
It's been amazing. I've been truly blessed with the feedback and just the thanks that I've received from the book. First and foremost, I want to mention my family. I feel in a lot of ways it's healed some hurts from the past. When the book first got published, and it was early in September of last year, I gave a copy to my aunt, who is the oldest living descendant of my grandfather. And she saw the book. She held the book for about 15, 20 minutes and just cried. I was like, wow, nephew, this is something. She said, that's my daddy on the cover. I said, yes, that's grandpa. And it healed a lot of hurts. Like I said, it's not about money, but just to see in his book that her dad is documented what he did. And also one of the things I did, which was personal for her and the Bond family, is I put a list of all 11 of his children. And one of them is named Priscilla Gayle Bond. And the story behind that is my grandparents legally adopted her, due to circumstances where a young woman could not take care of her. My grandparents took her, named Priscilla, because my grandma's name was Priscilla Rasco Bond. So here, my grandparents, who lost this idea that could have made them billions, they have 10 kids and adopt another one. And so I put all 11 siblings in the book. And the fourth one, Turner Charles Bond Sr., was my dad. So there was a lot of healing because 9 of his children have passed away. So there's only 2 left. And so I felt first and foremost, the family was honored by this. And so other people, different groups, different organizations, NAACP, entertainers like Chuck D and Public Enemy have read it, Chubb Broadcast, and it's just, the feedback has been amazing. I've had teachers buy from all over the country. One of my friends was principal in Brooklyn, brought 100 copies just so the students in the school could have them. And so that meant the world to me. And like I said, just especially the fact that my family now has this book that they could look at of what he could have been grandpa to some, dad to some, uncle to some, but still now it's documented. And the patent is in the book. So that validates the claim even more.
That's awesome. Definitely. Definitely want to salute you to, for taking on this challenge. I know it's not easy. People, they write books and they don't know what to becoming an author. So I'm glad that your experience is rather pleasant, on the pleasant side of things, because a lot of authors, they tell me that some of them lose their family members over writing a book. It's not what people think it is behind the scenes. When you author a book, and not everyone is happy with you writing the book. It opens up wounds. It can challenge people who haven't healed from past trauma, right? And it is, but it's a needed vessel, so to speak, in terms, because of what it carries. It carries wisdom from the old, from the past, that if we're not careful, can just get swallowed up, and you never hear about it again, right? And in this case, your grandfather is probably resting very peacefully, based knowing that his family held his name in high regard. So I want to salute you for writing the book, having the courage to take on this challenge and educate the masses about what really happened, because everybody has a car. Everybody
That's
is
right.
flicking the turning signal,
Mm-hmm.
and it was your grandfather that is responsible for the turning signal. So I just want to salute you, give you kudos for writing this book. What's the name of the book?
It's called Unsung But Forever Remembered. The man who invented the automobile turn signal, David George Bond.
Where can people find your book?
It is on Amazon. It's on Amazon right now. It's been on the bestseller list for the last couple of months. It's $13.99, and there's also an ebook as well. That's $3.99. So it's right on Amazon now. You can go get it, and it's selling real well. And it's a good read, and it's a slice of not just Black history, but it's a slice of American history.
Well, Black history is American history, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, it is. That's why I'm separated.
Yes, right. Can't separate the two. Now, I know that you are a history teacher by trade, right? And you recently was bestowed a special position. Can you tell us what that position is?
Yes, I was elected last Friday. I'm a board director member of the North Carolina Council for the Social Studies, and I ran in the election to be vice president for the North Carolina Council for the Social Studies. And on Friday, I was elected as the winner. So I'm now currently the vice president for the North Carolina Council for the Social Studies. And to God be glory, I'm so happy, I'm so honored to be able to have this title. And I'm just totally grateful for it.
Congratulations to you. I wanted to include this piece in it because I think it's very important, because I think you shared with me when you told me about it, that I don't believe a Black person has held this position before. Is that true? Or how you made history?
Yes, I'm the first, which is truly a blessing.
That's awesome. So we want to salute you for taking on American history, which is Black history, and adding to its legacy by writing this book about your grandfather, about how he created the turning signal, and not letting his legacy go quiet, and we want to bring as much attention to this book, attention to the history, because it's important. It's important for the next generation to have a sense of pride. I recall my parents, they brought us to see Nelson Mandela when he was at Yankee Stadium. And it's one thing to hear about him, but it was a whole nother thing to see him in person and hear him talk in person. And it electrified us. And I believe that my family, we were enlightened from having, been exposed. And a lot of our children these days are not as exposed as we were, you know. Just think about, you know, how much you love your family, you know, and I'm sure when you have your family, your next family reunion is going to be buzzing, and, you know, people are going to be happy, and they're going to talk about your book.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And that's truly what I'm happy about and honored for, because that was really the sole purpose for this. Like I said, it was not about trying to get money, whatever. And I did tell something, if it happens. But more than anything, I just want the story to be told so people will know, because I don't want it to be done where someone says David George Bond invented signal light and they say, no, that's a lie. I don't ever want that to be said again. But I want the people to know the truth, that this man from rural North Carolina at the age of 16 got a vision to invent this thing. And so I'm just trying to shout the story out as much as possible. I thank you for helping me bring the story out to the masses.
So what's next for you? You know, you wrote this book, and I can only get a feeling, sense that this is just the beginning for you. So would you have any more plans to write more books?
Well, you know what? The thing about it, one of the things I do want to look at is, I want to find out, I think I know now, is who did get I know who got the credit, but I was curious to find out who got compensation for the signal light. But also, you know, some of the work I want to continue deal with is I do a lot of working with students' social emotional needs. Matter of fact, when I was at the council conference this past week, I did a workshop on social emotional learning, you know, the abbreviated SEL. And what it really is strategies and tips on how to really help and teach on the social and emotional needs of students, because even before COVID, students had a lot of needs that really were not catered to in the classroom. And so that's been a goal of mine. So I want to continue to do more research into that, because one of my things that, you know, I do well and thrive on is teaching those kids who kind of a stereotype, that are kind of considered the ones left behind, or the misfit, the one that many times other teachers gave up on. Those, God be glory, seem to be the ones that thrive when I teach. One, because I'm not gonna make the class boring, it's gonna be interactive. You know, we're going to tell stories, we're gonna write, we're gonna sing. You know, it's not sitting for an hour. We're gonna learn, we're gonna draw, we're gonna write. We're gonna do a whole bunch of things in classrooms. So I'm thinking about doing more research on that, because it's, especially after the professional development I did, the training I did last Friday, a couple of people asked me, could I teach that again to some teachers that they know. One thing I've done is train other teachers when it comes to social emotional needs, or teaching those with ADHD or dyslexia, or those on the spectrum. And also teaching history, where one that's not boring, but also we talk about those people in history that the history books leaves out. That's one of the things I really like to do, because so many people and figures in history, they're not discussed. And for different reasons, like many times women are not discussed in the history books. And so I incorporate that as much as possible, not just with the Henrietta Lacks thing I have going with my students each year for the 5th year, but also I have students look at a Mae Jemison, first African-American woman in space, or Katherine Johnson, or even all the women from Hidden Figures. Can we think about what they did? We would not be able to go into space if it was not for the women in Hidden Figures. You know, look at the achievement of Harriet Tubman, where here her master threw a brick at her head, had seizures, but this woman went back and forth, escaping and rescuing her family. So I mean, these are those stories that you say, wow, history is really a cool subject. It's not as boring as some teachers make it out to be, because believe me, I've been in some history classes that you look forward to going to, and then there's some like, and I'm just being real. It's true. And so you want to have that history class where it's like, I can't wait to go to this class. We're going to learn today. Not that class where it's like, man, I'll see in 50 minutes take a good nap. So that's one of the things I do also with teaching those professional developments, and I'm gonna do that even more, especially after the school year ends.
Quick question for you. Now, as a teacher, are you legally tied with the type of curriculum that you are allowed to teach to students in a classroom setting? And we just talked about how a lot of history is left out of the books that are being used to teach our students. So is there a way that you are like trying to personally combat that as a teacher, or are you working within the confines of teaching the profession and still making your point?
Well, good question. Thankfully, North Carolina is not that bad. Like, I'm not going to name some other states where they're trying to stop all teaching and book burning and all types of stuff, and that's just a prayer in itself. So thankfully, it's not like that here. But when I do teach these subjects, I make sure it is part of the curriculum. And so, it's something you got to observe, but there's nothing I've taught that's outside the curriculum, because you could teach about people in history that is not necessarily given the accolades they should. So what I teach, there's nothing in there that's unethical or inappropriate. It's in the confines of the standards. What happens sometimes is some teachers don't want to talk about that. I'll give you a good example. And there was a debate about this the other day with Martin Luther King. Most schools, you have to teach Martin Luther King letter from Birmingham jail, when he talked about, why we can't wait for freedom. Matter of fact, you look in the AP U.S. history course, it's required reading for that, and AP government is required reading. But now here's where it gets a little tricky. Most don't teach that Martin Luther King was against the Vietnam War, that he did feel black should have reparations. There's a famous speech where you hear Martin Luther King yelling, "Yes, I'm black and I'm proud. Yes, I'm black and I'm proud." It's like they try to censor King with certain things. Just like I remember back in the day, and we graduated high school in the same time. Most educators did not teach about Malcolm X. No, they say it was a malcontent. He was this, he was that, he was this, he was that. Now you can. But so, like I said, depending on which state you're in, thankfully, I don't have that issue, but there's nothing I've taught where it's outside the confines of standards. Some topics I do teach about, people like to bring up. I remember when it comes to the Vietnam War, and I teach American history, no one wants to talk about, for the most part, the My Lai massacre, when we did kill Vietnamese citizens, children, babies, you name it. Most time, no one likes to touch that subject. Or another example, during World War II, and this also was in the AP history curriculum. After Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese, Franklin Roosevelt, the president, sent Executive Order 9066. What that did is force Japanese Americans, even if they're citizens, to be in concentration camps. Now, were the concentration camps as bad as Hitler's and Auschwitz and Birkenau? No. But when you put citizens behind the fence, behind the cage, we know it's wrong in all sense of the word. And one thing she'll talk about with that was that when the Japanese Americans came back after the war, a lot of their homes were destroyed and even bombed. So the US government had to pay those Japanese American families who lost their homes reparations. And nowadays reparations is considered a dirty word, because they say, well, you owe them money. Because we say you owe people money, you're saying basically you were wrong. And it's looked as trying to make an atonement for that. But yes, these are topics that are in the standards. But some teachers, I will say, are probably a little bit scared to touch those topics. I'm not.
Well, when you look at the racial disparity, we have a lot more like Caucasian teachers. I can gather why they wouldn't want to teach it. It's not theirs.
Right.
And then God bless the dead, one of my best friends, David Oliver, he was a new teacher, and he loved learning about what he was getting ready to embark on in his career as a teacher. As a matter of fact, he was well championed as a teacher before his demise last year. So we need more teachers. We need more educators that look like us, that can teach us. So I would encourage people to go and become a teachers, and just let's tell our own story so that we can tell it accurately.
Exactly.
And then don't want to make certain people feel uncomfortable telling our story for us, even though they try to do it, anyway through the movies and everything else,
Right.
So, but definitely, Dr. Bond, I just want to thank you for taking the time to stop by the CJ Kids podcast and enlighten us and share with us your story, because it's a powerful story that is resonating and doing very well. And hopefully we can combine in the future, maybe do a history project online and just be creative and think out of the box. And where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Bond 74. You can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Stephen Bond, one word, and on LinkedIn, Dr. Stephen Bond as well.
Okay, definitely. So thank you again for sharing your story about the book that you wrote about your grandfather and how he invented the turning signal. Is an amazing invention that we are all still using today, and that he deserves all the credit for and no one else, because it was his.
That's right.
So thank you for holding up the light. And at this age, you didn't even have to write the book, but you saw the importance, and I think that you should be championed as well. So kudos to you. Keep up your good work. Congratulations on your new position as well. And we know that you're going to do mighty work in that position, as the first African American to hold that position.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your help and support. It means a whole lot to me. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stephen Bond.